All right. So for Aristotle, the highest good is eudaimonia, which is human flourishing. Human flourishing. Oh wait, this should go up here too. There we go. Let me get rid of this. I think that's okay. So he's focusing on eudaimonia, which is a type of human flourishing, and the way we reach that goal is through virtue. And so ultimately we're aiming for virtue. For Kant, the highest goal is having your duty to the moral law. Whoa, Casca, say what's going on there? Oh yeah. We don't want 20 points. How about that? All right, so for Kant, he says we have a dion, a duty to the moral law. And so ultimately, the way you can know the moral law is through your intellect. But what is most important to him is our will. Because he says it's like a jewel. And at the end of the day, everyone can know the moral law using their reason and choose it for their will. And for Kant, that's what it means to be free. If you're picking things based on your emotions, then you might as well be like an animal. He doesn't like that. He wants us to use pure practical reason. And for Mill, as a hedonist, and we don't mean it in a pejorative sense, hedonism is the idea that pleasure is the highest good. So for him, that's what we should base our decisions on. Do whatever brings the most people the most pleasure. What would you guys say is the highest good for Jesus? What is the ground of kind of Jesus's ethical system? If you think back to like sophomore year or freshman year, what would you say? What's most important to Jesus? What should guide our decisions? Anybody? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what would Jesus say, like, is morally right? What's the highest good? Not sinning. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, love. Remember in the Gospel of John, he says, the greatest commandment. He says, love one another as I have loved you. And he says, by this, people will know you are my disciples. He says that you should be willing to die for the ones you love. So that's a really high standard, right? So let me make that a little bit smaller. So this is kind of the ground of each of these systems. So for Aristotle, like, what would such a person from such a system say when analyzing a dilemma? And so remember when we watched The Good Place a couple weeks ago, I thought what Chidi said to Eleanor was insightful for Aristotelians. To become a good person, do good things. And for Aristotle, becoming virtuous, that's what it means to be good. So to become virtuous, you need to know the good with reason, and choose it with your will. And if you're trying to figure out what should I choose, though, what's the good, he would say you should find the golden mean. Find the golden mean. And that's what virtue is. We've trained our appetites and desires to love the golden mean, so not too much, not too little. And that's why Aristotle says this leads to flourishing, because you're not ignoring your desires, but you're training them to love what you know is truly good for you, and to freely choose it. And that's the thing for Aristotle. That's why virtue brings you freedom, because you're not being pulled around by your emotions and desires. You've trained them to kind of, everything ends up being in harmony. For Kant, he says only the will is good in itself. And so our duty is to the moral law. And so we have to orient our will to the moral law. And for Kant, what is the moral law? Remember, he talked about the categorical imperative. So the categorical imperatives, we had the formula of the universal, which was never do anything you would not will become a universal law. So if I'm trying to think, you're going to think about taking out college loans in a couple months. You're thinking, well, maybe I just will never pay it back. Kant says no, a situation like that can't obtain. Because if everyone went around taking out loans with no intention of paying the money back, the whole system upon which lending is built would just collapse. The other categorical imperative is that you never use a person as a means to an end. So you never use another person as a means to an end, because people have intrinsic value for Kant. And for him, it's not because we're created in the image of God or anything like that. He says we're not allowed to violate another person's will. And so using a person as a means to an end would be a violation of their will, which for Kant, that's the highest good. You can't violate that. One last thing, a thing kind of like a mantra, a Kantian would say is that the ends don't justify the means. The ends do not justify the means. For a utilitarian, it's pretty simple. He would say, or she would say, bring the most happiness to the most people. And again, by happiness, they mean pleasure. Mill would want us to aim for higher pleasures rather than lower ones. They would also say that the ends do justify the means. And there are times we'll see, even in Catholic thought, where utilitarian considerations do come into play. Finally, what are some of the things we know Jesus says? We have up above the love commandment. He commands us not only to love our neighbor, but to love our enemies. As we already said, Jesus wouldn't want us to do anything sinful. We have the Ten Commandments. Those are, as a Jewish rabbi, remember when the rich young man was like, what should I do? And he's like, do you follow the commandments? He's like, yeah, I follow the commandments. And then Jesus is like, good, then give up everything and come follow me. And then the rich young man's like, nah, I don't want to do that. But Jesus asks us, to ultimately be guided by not just love of neighbor, but love of enemies, which is hard to do. Let's see. Anybody, any other things you would add to that? Other things for Jesus? So what are some of the good things about Aristotle's viewpoint? Is there's, it's kind of holistic. He sees both the rational, but also the emotional aspects of human nature, which I think in our society today, we're more aware of the idea of self-care, the idea that our emotions aren't something to be like pushed down and ignored, because that doesn't get you anywhere. So I think from the perspective of like today, I think that's something most of us would say is a good thing in Aristotle's view. Another thing is almost anyone can be better. If I just keep trying, I can become a better person. I just thought of something. I forgot what it was. Anybody can become better. Oh, my character is within my control. And so that's very empowering. I can control my own character. I'm not a slave to my passions. Kant didn't think that was true. He thought if you had a miserable personality, you're just doomed to be a miserable person. But Aristotle would say, no, practice being a more congenial person and you can eventually become one if you try hard enough. Let's see. So strengths for Kant, one might be consistency. If you follow Kant's logic, you're always going to be consistent. Like, remember Kant's axe? He says, never lie. Just never do it. I don't know if I like where that would take me, but if you value consistency, that would be a good thing. We would agree that human life has intrinsic value. Intrinsic value, that's definitely something that's good about Kant's ethics. Let's see. For utilitarianism, okay. We would agree that consequences do matter in blameworthiness. What did I type there? B. There we go. Consequences do matter in blameworthiness. We would agree with him on that score. It's pretty useful. If we're going to apply it to the lifeboat case in just a minute. And you'll see it's pretty easy to apply. And when we start looking at more specific Catholic moral dilemmas, we'll see where, especially in medical ethics, utilitarian type thinking becomes extremely important. I don't know about you guys, but human nature is held in high regard. I think that's actually, I admire that about Mill when you read him, and he really thinks that we will side with the better angels of our nature, and I find it charming. I don't think it's true, but I appreciate that. I think I'm like, gosh, I believe people could be like that. And then finally, Jesus's ethics. Jesus also values human life, so much so that he sacrifices himself for us. He includes spirituality. He doesn't leave, as a religious leader, he doesn't want us to check our spirituality at the door as like Mill and Kant want us to do. Aristotle, he's pre-Christian, so he's kind of doing his own thing. Those are good things, obviously, from a Catholic perspective. Jesus is, insofar as like the golden rule features large in Jesus's ethics, the golden rule can be a point of commonality. All religions have some type of expression of something like the golden rule, and we'll talk about why that's true in a couple weeks. Weaknesses for each. I think Aristotle can be a little bit vague, hard to apply to concrete instances, and we'll see that with the example for the test. He doesn't tell us much about which virtues are best. If you're like, you only have limited time, and you're only going to be alive for 85 years or something like that. I don't have a lot of time. Where should I start? I think it would say with friendship, but it's not super clear. Also, for Aristotle, he would say some people are hopeless. There are some people that they're so bad, you just got to kill them or exile them. Unlike Jesus says there's hope for all. And the way we get that hope from God's saving grace, that even somebody like the epitome of evil kind of in our day is like somebody like Adolf Hitler. If he would have come to faith in Christ, even he could have been saved, but he didn't, presumably. I guess a problem with Jesus's ethics would be, that would be a good thing. That would be a good thing. So a problem is it's so very difficult to live Jesus's ethics out consistently. Like, when Eleanor was like talking about the girl at the check stand, like that snooty girl making fun of my purchases. Like, if we were to actually live the way Jesus calls us to, man, that's hard. I don't know. I'm just glad we have the sacrament of reconciliation. Let's see. For Kant, he relies maybe too heavily on reason. And he does not consider consequences or circumstances. And actually, consequences are part of the circumstances of an event. And I think for most of us, would say that, like the example I had on the board, stealing $5 and stealing $5,000, like that's not the same thing. Like that matters. Anything else you would say for Kant? And like when we did Kant's Acts, the whole thing about lying, most of us are like, I don't know, guy. Like someone was it this one class was like, well, did Kant never tell a lie? Like, is he really living up to his own standard? Like, most of us probably aren't lying every day, but then there's like the little white lies, you know. Wait, I put this in the wrong place, didn't I? That would go there. Weaknesses of utilitarianism, obviously, it puts minorities at risk. Now, it should not. Like, if you're a true utilitarian, you would be willing to make sacrifices, even for a minority group, even if it was like, the majority wanted something. Like Mill thought people would do that, but the problem is, if we look at the facts of history, that's not what bears out. So it could put minority groups at a risk if you, and we're seeing that in Canada right now with vulnerable populations who are elderly and who are disabled are at risk in Canada. Also, the mentally ill, because typically when people have depression and are suicidal, most of the time we want to help them. But now in Canada and in places in Europe, they're helping people kill themselves. Frankly, it can devolve into might makes right. Oh, and then I think you guys pointed this out the other day, or at least one class did. You can't predict all outcomes. If your system is based on the assumption that, like, by allowing Coventry to be attacked, you save more people, well, you can't know that. You don't have a crystal ball. The Catholic Church, think about what the United States did. We dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we had the same argument. We're like, look, we got to bring this war to an end. It'll save more lives in the long run. But we intentionally dropped atomic weapons on civilian populations. And from a Catholic perspective, that can never be morally justifiable. So you'd have to ask yourself, what do I think? Up here, remember in the scene from the Good Place, Michael said, just tell me the right answer. But Chidi said, that's the great thing about the trolley problem. There is no right answer. So each one of you is going to have to, as you go through your life, that's why you're taking like this class. You're going to get all these different perspectives. You're not going to be like in Plato's cave, just hopefully you're not just like looking at the shadows on the wall. Now you have this kind of whole tableau of ideas, of different systems of logic that you can use, and that is the challenge of the moral life, is using your conscience to come to the decision about what is the right thing for me to do in this situation. And that's why it's so challenging, because no one can tell you the right answer. Nobody can. You have to use your knowledge, your experience, and your conscience to figure that out. And what we'll be doing for the rest of the semester is looking at what are the tools, what are the principles, and what are the systems of logic that the church provides Catholics in helping to guide us. Sound good? It's like time to go, huh? Okay. Thank you, ladies. Have a good day.